washing the windows.
Hi, I'm Circe Olson Woessner. I'm the founder and director of the Museum of the American Military Family in Tijeras, New Mexico.
And I'm Shanon Hyde, the host of the Best Military Kids podcast on the internet, the Shanon Show. And I'm also the student liaison for Dr. Woessner's phenomenal museum, Museum of the American Military Family. Today, we have a phenomenal show planned for everyone. We're interviewing Thomas M. Brady, who's the director of the Department of Defense Education Activity, more commonly known as DoDEA. As DoDEA's director, Mr. Brady has oversight of all Defense Department K-12 schools, both stateside and overseas. DoDEA operates 160 schools in 8 districts, serving more than 69,688 students. Very excited for this. Welcome, Mr. Brady, to the show today.
Well, thank you, Shanon. Thank you, Circe. Great to be here.
Well, we're very excited to have you with us today. You know, both Shanon and I are products of the DoD school system. I went to school in Karlsruhe, Germany, kindergarten through my senior year, which was 1979. Shanon, when were you at Kubasaki High?
I was at Kubasaki from 2016 through 2019.
So that's like 40 years between us or something. So I feel really old right now.
Well, imagine how I feel.
Yeah. So, Mr. Brady, how did you hear about DoDEA and when did you come aboard the school system?
I came aboard in 2014, which seems like yesterday, truth be told. And how did I hear about it? A friend of mine who worked in the Pentagon thought that perhaps I might be interested in the position. I had, being a retired Army officer and being in public education for 17 years, thought I might have a pretty decent background in DoDEA, and I thought about it. And my wife went to DoDEA schools. My 5 children went to DoDEA schools. 3 of my 9 grandchildren attended DoDEA schools. That coupled with my military background and education background, I thought, you know, maybe I could make this happen. And so I applied and I was selected in 2014 and it's been wonderful ever since.
Well, Shanon, there may be some more interviews for your podcast. Always kidding.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
So, Mr. Brady, I know you have extensive experience in education. You were the former superintendent of Providence, Rhode Island Public Schools, and before that, the chief executive officer for the District of Philadelphia and the chief operating officer for Fairfax County Public Schools and District of Columbia Public Schools. When you compare those stateside school systems to DoDEA, what are the biggest differences between them?
You know, that's a great question. And you start with all children want to learn, and all parents want to see their children succeed. And so what separates DoDEA and its remarkable children from those urban districts that you just talked about, or Fairfax County, which is a superb suburban district? So I think there's 5 things that come to mind that separate a DoDEA student from, let's say, a urban student in Providence or DC or Philadelphia. Number 1 is our children's parents belong to an organization that requires them to meet a standard. And if they don't meet that standard, the parents are no longer part of the organization. So their children are no longer part of DoDEA. That's number 1. Number 2 is our students have access to a wonderful healthcare system. Number 3 is they have an opportunity for 3 meals a day should they choose to eat them. And they have, number 4 is they have a roof over their head. And number 5 is they have parents who care. When I was an urban student superintendent, if I had 3 of the 5, I considered it very lucky. So we are blessed with unique circumstances for our students and our stakeholder parents.
Interesting.
Could you walk us through, just being the director of DoDEA, some of your daily responsibilities? Like, what does that workflow usually go like for you on a daily basis?
What's a day in the office? I wish I could say, well, I come in precisely at, and then we have a staff meeting, and then I leave precisely at. The great thing about DoDEA, as you all know, is that it's a 24/7 operation. There's some, I think we looked at it on a 24-hour across the globe. There's some DoDEA student and teacher and administrator doing something 24 hours a day. Right. So I'm blessed with a great staff and great leaders in the field and great teachers and great administrators. So I'm not in a firefighting. I'm not putting out a crisis of the day 99% of the time. So I'm doing the normal boring bureaucratic stuff, having the staff meetings, making sure we're looking ahead. Do we have a strategic plan? Are we following the strategic plan? What are we doing, executing from day to day? But my most important job is to be the link between the stakeholders and the Pentagon and DoDEA. My mission is to make sure my bosses understand what we're doing and how well we're doing it, and to minimize, how should I put this? Minimize over management. What's the term?
Micromanaging?
Micromanagement. That is my mission. If you've been in the education business for a while, you know that everybody's an expert because they went to high school. So what I want to do is make sure that our policymakers, our resource decision makers understand the impact of DoDEA, and we don't need any micromanagement. We just need broad guidance and we'll be fine. So that's really, I think, a very important role that the director plays in being the public relations point focus for those outside the organization. And then, of course, they'll give leadership and management within the organization. So a typical day is a typical day. It can range from being a bureaucrat and signing papers to really being involved in a particular instance at a school or in the Pacific or the Europe, and coordinating with leaders and making sure that that we get to a good result, whatever the case is.
So
It's very interesting. Yes. Sorry.
where do you sit on an org chart? So who do you report to?
So the org chart, and we love org charts. So DoDEA reports to a deputy assistant secretary of defense called who's Manpower and Reserve Affairs. Okay. The next level up is the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, who reports to the Secretary of Defense. So as a separate agency within the Department of Defense, I have I'm a SES Tier 3. Look at me, how important I am. I'm a three-star equivalent, but I report to a 4-star equivalent and a 4-star equivalent. And of course, the Secretary of Defense runs the place. And of course, the Commander-in-Chief runs the place, but through the Secretary of Defense. So I'm 2 away from the Secretary of Defense. That frame it for you?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you mentioned that we have schools all over the Pacific and Europe and all over the world. Being involved with a school's district community is critical for a school system's success. With schools all over the place, how do you stay up to date and engaged with everybody? Yeah.
It's fantastic. It really is. It gives me an opportunity to put millions of miles on my airline account. I think it's important for a leader to be out. I think it's important a leader to be with the subordinate leaders and the administrative principals and teachers, and being in schools and seeing our students. So when I first took the job back in 2014, I said I was going to be in all 168 schools in a year. And people laughed, like Frank O'Gara just laughed, and he said, "You're never going to be able to do it." So within the first year, I visited 168 schools. Now, if you gave me a test afterwards, like what happened at Kubasaki High School, I'd have to kind of take a moment to put the 2 and 2 together. But I did get to every school, and after that, I realized I couldn't do that every year. But I can certainly visit a number of schools. I can visit. We have often meeting with the key leaders, and now this is before COVID, of course. We'd have meetings in the Pacific and Europe. We'd have opening of school conferences, so that they can share and understand what we have, what's called the blueprint for DoDEA, which is the 5-year strategic plan. And so everyone understands what that is. And so I get to communicate that. I have all hands meetings when I do go out to visit, where we have all the teachers together and we talk about what's to give them an update. I send out director updates, I think every other week, through the emails. And it's, I know how important it is, and I try to do it in person as best I can, even in COVID. But I think a constant communication and thanking the great work for the great people that work for us, and taking care of our students is really important. And I try to keep that as a #1 priority.
That's fantastic. That's so good to hear. I mean, just all the in-person commitment to the students and teachers. And
Shannon, excuse me for interrupting, but I think
No worries.
now that you put my head back in the game here. When I go to middle schools and high schools, and sometimes at elementaries, I make it a point as to going from classroom to classroom. I have students together and we have lunch. And there's nobody else there. There's no administrators, no teachers, and it's me and them. And I said, like, okay, Shannon, you're here. You're the president of the student council. What's really going on? And you know what's great is students, they're remarkably honest. And I can get a real feel for what's going on in the school, particularly when there's no adults around other than myself. So I think that's a key part of getting out and listening to. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine. To answer my question, I just want to hear about those personal interactions. That must mean a lot to them. So that's really cool to hear.
I remember at West Point one time, I was having lunch with the middle school students, and my wife attended West Point Elementary School. And she's, I'm talking about a second grader, right? And this is like 1950 something. And they lived in a housing area about 2/3 of a mile up a hill.
Mm-hmm.
And those little kids, my wife and her sister and her brother, would walk down to school, walk back home for lunch, walk back down to the elementary school. So I thought it was a great opportunity. And the kids I was talking to lived in the same housing area. And I said, you know, boy, this is a long walk for you kids, right? And they looked at me like I was from outer space. They said, walk? No, our parents drop us off and we don't walk. What are you, crazy? It's 2/3 of a mile. So things change. You have to understand things change. So anyway, I digress. Go
ahead. So as a former teacher at Roosevelt Roads Middle High School.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I was impressed with all the resources and supplies I had at my fingertips at that time, the technology and the textbooks and the funds for student clubs and extracurriculars.
Yeah.
I've worked in parochial schools and public schools elsewhere, and DoDEA seems to get so much better funded. Can you explain to our viewers how DoDEA gets its funding and how you figure out budgets for schools located in different districts all around the world?
I think you're hitting on a key point. And again, I should have covered this when I was talking about what the director of DoDEA does. It's very important for us as an organization to remind, and we don't have to do it often, but to remind decision makers when it comes to allocating resources, that why is our system unique from the many public school systems I worked in and the parochial schools I attended, where teachers have to come out of their own pocket to pay for supplies, where often children don't have the money to buy the school work necessary. They certainly have a technology issue in both internet access and the actual laptops or whatever they're going to use. So what's so special about us? Well, this is absolutely critical. We have a direct impact on the readiness of the armed forces around the world. The men and women that we put in harm's way to defend the nation have to have a mission focus on what they do. And if they're worrying about their children in school, they're not going to be as effective as they should be. And so it is critical for us to be absolutely excellent and absolutely not to have our parents worrying about their children while they're in our care, and to make sure that we are available and we provide the level of education that our stakeholders, our parents demand and deserve. And so linked to readiness, the decision makers in the Department of Defense for the last 60 years have decided that's pretty important. And when it comes to pencils, copiers, electronics, technology, that it's pretty important that they fund that accordingly. And so it doesn't say we have a blank check for anything we want, but when we're within a reasonable budget exercise and demand, that we've been blessed by having remarkable resources since 1946, and even before that, back on the schools down in the South. So that's always a challenge, but it's never been an issue because of the impact on readiness, in my opinion.
Gotcha. Whenever you mentioned excellence within DoDEA and the school system, and it's kind of held to a higher standard for good reason. Whenever you put together the curriculum, and do you look around at other states or other school systems and take inspiration from that and try to take the best from everything?
That's a great question. We about 6 years ago, it was pretty clear to me that DoDEA is great, and it's been great for years.
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't, oh my God, they didn't know anything until I got here. However, it was clear to me that we needed a consistent curriculum across the globe. So as I went to a high school in Kubasaki, for example, they were on social studies and they were somewhere here.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'd go to Germany and I'd go to a high school and they're in social studies and they're nowhere near where Kubasaki was. And in the United States at Fort Knox, they weren't there either. So I could see that there were 3 different school systems for all intents and purposes, pretty much under the same name, but not with the same academic structure or the same discipline. So what we did was we took a look at what was called the Common Core Standards, where 47 states came together and said, this is what we need to do for college and career ready. Now it became politicized, and I don't care about that. But we took those standards, and we named them College and Career Ready Standards for DoDEA, and we began the implementation 6 years ago. And to do a complete system implementation for every subject at every grade takes about 6 years. You got to buy the curriculum, you have to buy the materials, you have to do the professional development for the teachers. You have to have an assessment system to know whether you've done it correctly. And we have now we have implemented the rigorous standards, number one. And number two, we begin the assessment on exactly what we're doing and what we're not. And so I've been very, very pleased with the results, and I'll give you an antidote. So we had a 5th grader who was attending Bob Hope Elementary School on Okinawa, right? Mm. And I got an email from a teacher at Fort Benning saying that, we'll call him Shanon, okay? I've just got Shanon, he came from Okinawa, and we began our science lesson, and he had a science notebook, and it was 1 page off on what he had been doing in Okinawa and what he's going to be doing at Fort Benning, Georgia. And I said, man, that's exactly where we needed to be. And I think I see more consistency in that every day. So that's a long-winded answer, I think, to your question.
Absolutely. And that makes it so much easier for students, as you just mentioned, if they're transitioning from one place to another and it's still within DoDEA, they can pick up right where they left off. And that must make it so much easier for so many kids.
As you both well know, and I know from my 5 kids and 9 grandkids, the hardest thing about moving is the transition from place to place. Mm-hmm. Another thing I ask the kids when I'm having lunch with them, the high school students, I'll say, so if I'm new to the school, what's my first day like? When I get to the cafeteria, am I sitting by myself at some table and looking over at the cool kid table? And they absolutely attack me when I say that, because oh no, we've sponsored, we welcome, we know what it's like. And it's so nice to know that there's that feeling within DoDEA that we're going to take care of each other. It's a family. I've been down that road. I don't want to sit by myself at some kind of cafeteria table. And there's so many wonderful sponsorship programs. So that makes me feel better too.
Well, speaking of transitioning, Shanon is writing a book. Talk about your book.
Yes, please. I'm in the works of writing a book now. I'm doing it with the museum. That's going to be all about students transitioning, not within high school, but also with going to college, which is another big transition that DoDEA students have to make. and I think it's not necessarily talked about enough. So I would just like to shed some light on it. And I think it's a really fantastic project, and I'm talking to some really great people.
Oh, that's terrific. That's a great project. If I can be of any help, please let me know.
I appreciate that.
Well, I had to throw that in because it was a perfect segue.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm working in an elementary school part-time right now, and it doesn't have dedicated teachers for art, music, or PE. It falls on the classroom teacher to teach these subjects. And I don't think my school, the one that I'm affiliated with, is unique in that regard. And has DoDEA managed to continue to offer art, music, PE in its school system? And, you know,
Well,
how do you manage? Oh, in elementary school, actually.
yeah. I think of my days in DC and in Philadelphia and in Providence, and I think of the pressure that's on a superintendent to make a decision on the limited resources they have. And as I recall, in all those cities, it was also, you're not going to get, we know you need this, but you're not going to get that. So what are you going to do? And inevitably, art, music, and PE were the first on the chopping block. And it's a hard decision to make. Or you're not going to cut math and ELA, right? You're not going to do the English teachers, but are you going to cut extracurricular activities? You're going to cut sports for the very children that need it. So what is the least impactful decision you have to make? And it's not a good one. And so you look at the soft subjects like the art, music, and PE. I hated every minute of that. And I am delighted to say that DoDEA, with the resourcing that we have art, music, and PE at every one of our schools, from elementary school through high school. And it would be, knock on wood, the last thing that I would ever cut, because of the value that teachers in music and art and physical education is so mind and body, right? And something that's, I love math, I love English, I love history, but there is more to life than that. And I think that a good art teacher and music teacher bring that out. And our students are located in areas, many are in areas of the world where they can actually go out and see these wonderful works of art in Europe and in the Pacific. So we have not had to make that cut. And I think in the near term, short term, midterm, long term, I don't see us having to do that, because a full curriculum, to my mind, includes those subjects. And it's not just art on a card where one teacher will be going from 15 classrooms. So I feel very strong about that, actually.
That's fantastic. It's really important things that keep involved in students' lives. So it's great to hear. What do you think are DoDEA's best assets as of right now?
Best
assets?
I'm sorry, I'm old and my hearing is. What is DoDEA?
DoDEA's best assets.
Oh, okay, that's difficult. Thank you for.
No worries. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So what's our best asset? You got to start in the classroom. You got to start with teachers, but actually the teachers are teaching students. So our best assets are our students and our teachers, and our support. I'm not stumped on it. It's just we have so many of the best. It's really it's hard to drag to what comes to mind. I think of students in our schools, and they're the best. And our teachers are providing the best that we can, and all the people that are in the supply and all the support services are the best. And so I guess it's what do we need to improve upon, more so than the best. And I think we owe it to our students and our parents to be the best. And I think we could probably improve in, I think we could probably improve on making sure our teachers have the best professional development and up-to-date curriculum material. and let them do to allow them to be the best they can. And so that's a long backward way to getting to what I think we do best is not everything, but we certainly are world class. But I think we can be better at preparing our principals and teachers with the right materials and right professional development to even improve more.
So when I was thinking about Shannon's question about assets, I was thinking about some of the resources that we had available. When I was teaching at Rosie Roads, I was able to get experts from the military community to come in to help with my lessons. And so, for example, I had people from the base legal office come in to help my students prepare for a mock trial. And I remember in the 70s when I was in high school, MPs used to come to our PE class to teach the girls self-defense. And so I guess the resources available on a military installation probably can enrich a teacher's, classroom lessons. But do teachers in DoDEA have the freedom to modify the core curriculum or the lesson plans, or have the ability to draw on local or civilian resources or subject matter experts to come teach classes?
Well, it's not, there is an opportunity for that. And the wonderful thing in an installation is you can draw, as you know, from the entire gamut. And there are things that are built into the curriculum times where they can call in, and actually they're encouraged to do that, because I want a partnership between the school principal and the local superintendent with the military commanders on post, and on base, and on installations. I'll give you an example. During this COVID crisis, if we had to have a link with every working function at a post or an installation to be successful as we had been in providing face-to-face instruction. And so we had the medical experts, we had the entire teams deployed to the school to assist us, make sure we were following CDC mitigation efforts, and that was a real success story. So that reinforces the need to be collaborative with our leaders and on the local installations. And I encourage teachers to reach out to, I think often many of our schools are adopted by a local unit. And so an engineer battalion will be affiliated with a particular elementary, and they bring in and they adopt them and they bring in their experts, and the field days are wonderful. And it's just, I think it expands their curriculum and broadens their horizon.
Cool.
You mentioned COVID, and I was curious, what is the biggest takeaway from virtual learning? I'm sure that was a very hectic time for you.
You know, you asked before about the best, and I think that this shines as a great example of how great DoDEA reacted to the COVID. So we had three. Number one is face-to-face. Being in school is the best way for children to learn. We know that. But unfortunately, COVID had different ideas, right? But what we had to do, and what our teachers and principals did so remarkably well, is transition from face-to-face to remote. And for your listeners' sake, when I say remote, it means a teacher and their class on a Google Classroom together. That's remote. And how do you take, but they did it. How do you take it's very difficult to do remote instruction. And so in a very short period of time, our teachers learned how to do remote instruction. Our students reacted well. They attended. We could tell that they were there. The assignments were being done. Parents were overseeing it. Now, admittedly, at the elementary level, it's a little tough, particularly having more than one or two children at home. But they did remarkably well. Our parents get a great kudo. Our teachers, for when the COVID was first identified in Korea, and we had to shut the school because of COVID, we went to remote, and within 72 hours, all our teachers were up on Google Classroom, and they were actually getting through beginning remote instruction. And it went from Korea to Italy to Germany, the Benelux, and then to the United States. So it was remarkable. But the other part of that was that there's a virtual school in DoDEA. You may have taken some classes, right? It's a
I've heard of it,
certified,
yes.
yeah, it is a long, it's been around for 10 years. It's a accredited high school course supplemental. So if you're in Kupasaki, you can take German AP through the virtual school. Well, I thought it was important that we expand that opportunity for virtual school for children for children whose parents weren't comfortable with them going to back to school. And we had close to 300 teachers who were medically fragile and not comfortable in going back to school. So in our DoDEA virtual school, we went from 2,000 high school students to 12,500 K through 12 students in about 3 weeks. And they reacted so well that it just, then the following semester went to 5,000. And this school year, we started with about 800. So we had the three aspects of instruction, and all did remarkably well.
So I have a question. So, virtual school and the remote learning because of COVID, how did you know, or how did you find out whether students had computers or didn't have computers or internet? And then how did DoDEA pivot to help those kids?
Well, excellent question. We issued over 7,000 Chromebooks to those students who did not have laptops at home. And we had, and that doesn't solve the internet problem. So we issued over 400 hotspots to our students and some teachers who were in remote locations so that they could have internet access and they had their device. So that's how we accounted for it.
That's fantastic. That's so cool.
And now, and I'll share with your listeners as best I can, we've had the result of the end of years, the summative exams at the end of the year. And so we've just gotten the results of our summative assessments. And it's very much like in the United States where states have state tests at the end of the year. I think in Virginia, they're called Standards of Learning, SOLs, MCAS in Maryland, comprehensive assessments in any case. So the question is, how effective were we? Well, you can't compare the results directly. You cannot. But it's been nationwide. It's shown that states have gone down approximately 9 to 15 percentage points from the previous year during the COVID year in English language arts, and anywhere between 10 to 25% in mathematics. That was the learning loss for a host of reasons. And again, I'm not directly comparing that, but that was the US standard. Well, in DoDEA, I'm very, very pleased to say that in English language arts, we remained exactly the same as we did in the pre-COVID year, but did go up for students with disabilities and minorities. So we saw an increase during COVID. And in mathematics, we went down 1%, and we saw the minority achievement and special education achievement remain constant. So not compared, but in some form of comparison with the United States, that if you're looking at a normal 9, 15, 10, 15% drop, that we didn't, and in fact increased with 3, 4 different groups, that indicates how great the teachers and principals had done and how well the students did. And I'm very pleased with that.
That's great to hear. I'm so glad to hear that everyone was able to keep up, because I know it was definitely a stressful time, but just to hear that the academics didn't slip for too many kids, that really makes me happy. I have a question actually about social media. This is I feel a little strongly about this, but I know it's becoming a very big part of teens' lives every year. They're constantly on the phone, constantly. It's taking a lot more of their attention spans, whether it's distracting them from school. I I'm not sure the extent of it, but I know it's getting worse. Have you ever considered maybe a program that kind of teaches kids about these negative effects, that shows them, hey, these are the designs of social media apps, they're taking your attention, you need to find a way to kind of combat this? Maybe something like a DARE drug prevention program. I was just curious your thoughts on it and
Yeah,
where it could lead.
I think you hit a good point, Shannon. I think that today and usually you say the high school students, but it's not. It's middle school students and
Right.
elementary school students, and the things they can do on with an internet and an iPhone are
Hmm.
absolutely incredible. And I don't think people of my generation and the next one back are really comfortable with all or knowledgeable of all the things that are out there that our children have access to and can control.
Right.
So we have some courses, IT, citizenship, technology, primer, but I don't think, and you're challenging me, I don't think that we have
Right.
um, the course material yet that says, here's some things out there. We know you do it all the time. Here's some things you have to be cognizant of.
Right.
Uh, and I'm oversimplifying a very complex issue, but I think
Hmm.
what you're getting to is there's a lot of evil out there that we have to protect, that kids should be aware of.
Right.
And there's a lot of stupid things that they can do that we don't want them to do now, because once it gets on the internet, it's going to be there forever.
Hmm.
And you even see that today. It's some adults that have made statements 10 years ago, and it comes back to haunt them. So we owe it to our students, but we don't have that design yet. Now you've challenged me to come up with something.
I'm looking forward to it. And it's just something I love to talk about and
Yeah.
kind of spread awareness to, because it's almost bigger than just basic internet safety. It's
Oh, yeah.
really it's a whole new thing, and not just for the
Addiction.
safety of students, but for their parents as well, our service members.
Yeah.
Um,
It's addiction, it's self-esteem, it's bullying, it's mental health, it's a
Yeah,
lot.
you're absolutely right, Circe. And we do have, and not to sell the organization, sure, we have a great anti-bullying program.
mhm.
But it's not together, I think, as Shannon's seeing in his vision, where it discusses all of that for both students and parents. And I think that's something we need to think through. You're absolutely right.
Okay.
Uh, Sorry. Returning from the pandemic, I think, wait, we already,
Yeah, that's right, you're right.
right. Okay. I was just wanted to ask you, what is being done to make sure there's a smooth transition back into in-person learning? I know you already said that there wasn't too much of a drop off, which is great to hear,
Yeah,
but it's more than just academics. Yeah.
it is. And again, we go back to what happened during the COVID, and I saw such creativity and sensitivity to students. Um, there were communities that came together for graduation ceremonies that bring tears to your eyes, where cars would line up. They were 10 feet apart, that there were pictures of students and they're lining the boulevard towards the school, big pictures of the students. Um, just communities coming together to recognize that this is probably the worst thing that could happen to seniors in high school. They don't have their graduation ceremony as they normally would, don't have the prom. And so they tried to do as best they can given the circumstances. And they were absolutely terrific. But in the transition back, what are we worried about? Well, yeah, the academics are fine. And we're having the ins and outs of the Delta variant, and we have contact tracing, and we know that schools, some classes are in and out, but we'll do that. I'm concerned now with the long-term effects of COVID. And what is that doing for students in social terms and in mental
Right.
wellness terms? And we've got a program that came out of Lake and Heath High School. And it's actually in coordination, and it is bigger than that. It's actually in coordination with Penn State too. where it's the acronym is MTSS. Anyway, it's the mental well-being of faculty and students, and what can we do proactively to address these issues. And I use Lake and Heath because they were our model, and it was directed at the teacher, faculty, and the students. How do we talk about it? What kind of counseling do we have? And how do they talk among themselves? And how do they talk as a team? And what I saw, and it made me feel so great, is that suicide attempts, suicide ideations in the 2 previous years had been in low 40s, 50s over the course of the entire year. And if that's the worst indicator. And after this program was put into effect, it dropped down to 2. And I thought, well, that's magic, and we've got to capture that, and we've got to put it throughout the entire system. So again, we partner with Penn State. It's an entire behavioral science tools and how to address the emotional and social needs of our students and our faculty. And that's what we'll be concentrating on this year, because I think the ins and outs of whether you're remote or whether you're back to class, that's all going to work out, and I think we're really good at that. But I don't want the long-term effects of this to be overlooked, and so we're putting a great deal of emphasis on that.
That's great to hear.
So I know we had just been talking about, we talked about the academics not, going down and during COVID, and the DoDEA students consistently perform well compared to stateside peers. And I know we've talked about engaged parents and the mission and the funding and all of that. Is there any other thing you would attribute to DoDEA's student success that we haven't already mentioned?
Well, I think I gave a snapshot of the students themselves, and it's a very simplistic snapshot of how it compares to other students and other who aren't as blessed in terms of resources. I think did I mention our teachers and our principals as being remarkable in the sense of you've taught in a parochial school, right? And that you're blessed to have done that. But when you're a teacher and you're overseas, and you know this, it's completely different in that your community becomes, you're not going to school and going home. You are part of that community. You're part of a forward deployed force somewhere in the Europe or the Pacific. It brings a different how we look at things, I think, mentality to teachers and principals. And so your Thanksgiving becomes a different Thanksgiving because your family are your co-workers and your school fellow teachers and your neighbors. When you go to the commissary, the food shop to make your shopping, then you have a parent-teacher conference at every aisle. It is just a different setting. And I think that contributes to our staff, our teachers and principals understanding the mission, understanding their parents, and understanding their students. And I just think that's part of the success package, is that we have that mental approach where it's family, it's community. These are, and it's not to say that's not in other school districts in the United States and they're not good. It's just, hey, it's unique to us. And I think that's a factor in our achievement.
Well, yeah, I think you're alluding to the relationships between the teachers and each other, and the teachers and the students, and the whole school community, military community. I wanted to interrupt right now and make a commercial message. Schooling with Uncle Sam book is 340 plus pages of stories written by teachers and students talking about special relationships and what made their careers and their school time in DoDEA special. And so you're going to hear about exactly what you said. You know your parents, your kids. So this is coming out in October 2021. And it's very thick, and you think you wrote the introduction.
I wrote the forward, so
You wrote the forward and
yeah.
Shanon contributed a story. So it's all good. But I think you're right. That one of the reasons why DoDEA students perform so well is the tight-knit community and the relationships.
Yes.
And I think also the Common Core, what did you call them? The
College and career standards.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important. The great thing about the family and how people view it, it is so easy for me to walk through the Pentagon and somebody will say, oh, that's the director of DoDEA. And all these high-ranking officials will come over and say, hey, I went to fill in the blank. And they have such allegiance and devotion to that high school that they graduated from or attended. It's just absolutely terrific. And this is like 30 years before, sometimes 40 years. And they still have that affinity. Hey, I went to Kubasaki, you know, blah, blah, blah. And it just makes me feel so good that that community and family tradition continues even to this day.
Right. Carl's
Really,
19.
Here you go.
Shanon, you were going to say something.
right. It really is a strong connection. Like it's just such a big part of students' identities moving forward. And anytime there's a handful of Kubasaki students that are at Penn State, and I meet up with them like once a week just to talk about old Kubasaki memories. And it's just fantastic because it's such a unique lifestyle. And it's great to have a few people to share that with. Whenever you envision or meet well-rounded DoDEA graduates, what skills do they have and what do you want their futures to look like?
The traditional way you'd look at success is how many went to four-year colleges, how many went to two-year colleges, who served in the military, who have careers, and that's only part of the issue. What I think of when I think of a successful graduate is that we have prepared him or her, that they are prepared for the skills necessary to be successful in the 21st century, regardless of what they choose to do. Sort of what they choose to do is secondary. What I'm looking for example, is that someone like you can go out and you understand problem solving, you know how to work collaboratively, you know how to pick up your laptop and go from place to place, plug it in, talk, and the skill sets necessary as you look at, regardless of what industry, are reliant upon small groups of people getting together and problem solving. And if we don't teach those kind of skills, then you're going to be you're going to be at a loss. And I'm really pleased that all of our students have exposure to that. They have an opportunity in small sessions and small groups. They have great mentoring in with their teachers. And so I think those that are equipped with those kind of skill sets will be remarkably successful regardless of what the two-year or four-year institution lead them to. And so I think that that's an important piece of what we do.
Absolutely. And that always can't be, quantified on paper for a student. No. It's something much bigger than that. And that's, once again, great to hear.
So when my mom and dad also taught for UC.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, when they started teaching in the overseas school system, the high school in Izmir, Turkey in the 50s was an old tobacco warehouse.
I've heard about that.
Yeah. Do you have, well, and my dad mentions that sometimes they had classes in the officers club. And things like that. But do you have any schools currently, or do you know of any former schools that have also had interesting past lives before they became DoD schools?
I'm sure when those brave men and women got off troop ships in 1946, that they had they had bombed out buildings, they had officers club, they had Quonset huts, they had whatever was there. But the good news is, you talked about resources. DOD said, you know what, our students need top quality facilities as well as all the things that go with it, to include great curriculum and great teachers. So they've invested $4 billion over the last 12 years in upgrading every one of our facilities. it would turn your head now to see some of the schools that your dad taught at or you attended, if they were open, of course. Calls through as a memory, but yeah, I know. But in the schools, they're upgraded tremendously, thanks to that investment that we get from DoD. So currently, I don't know of any with a great, that used to be a tobacco thing in Izmir. I'm not sure. I do know that they're all top quality and up to date, and as a superintendent in urban districts, you just can't. My head explodes. You can't compare the 50-year-old schools that have had no maintenance for 50 years that we actually try to teach children in, and compared to DoDEA and the remarkable, beautiful facilities we have. But I have that as a challenge now. I'm going to have to go back and see some of those unique research, some of the unique things that DoDEA, classroom buildings that have a story to them. And I love the tobacco factory.
Yeah, well, you'll hear some commercial.
Okay, I'll read the book.
But I do. And today you just opened the Bob Hope School. Is that true? Was that true?
Yeah, Bob Hope, and it's called the 21st Century School. Well, of course, it's in the 21st century, but that's not the point. It's designed completely different. The schools that you taught at and the ones that I went to as a kid and taught at, think of it as like an elementary with 32 classrooms, and each teacher have their students, and they close the door and the magic happened. Well, sometimes it was magic, sometimes not so much. And so we've had an opportunity to design what's called 21st century teaching and learning schools so that they are not 32 classrooms. They are groups, and it's open space. And it's the third grade or fourth grade wing. And so all the fourth grade students will gather together, and then they can divide into smaller work groups. And the teachers will get together as a team and team teach. And it just reinforces what I was telling Shannon before about what skills are we trying to inculcate in our students for success. And I'll give you two antidotes. So I was in Olson, Korea, and there was a fourth grade pod, and there were 4 fourth grade teachers. Now think of it, 4 former fourth grade classes, right? So they were all together, and I went to one of the classroom teachers, and I said, so which one are your students? Meaning, if you went back to a classroom, which one were yours? And she said, they're all my students. So all the fourth graders became hers because she was part of the fourth grade team. I thought that was terrific. The other time I was in a primary school at Fort Bragg, and a colonel came up to me and said, you know how stuffy colonels can be. He came up and said, Mr. Brady, do you know what the heck are you doing in there? And I said, well, Colonel, you're going to have to be a little bit more specific than what the heck are you doing in there? And he said, my first grader came home the other night, dinner, and he said, Dad, we have to have more collaborative meetings before we make decisions. And I said, well, I'm thinking, oh, that's pretty good, right? And he said, collaborative decision-making and family meetings. I didn't hear about collaborative decision-making until I was in college, and even then it was marginal. So once again, reinforcing that if first graders are talking about that, that's really a good sign. And maybe colonels can kind of figure out after the fact.
Right. I got to see some of that firsthand actually at the Zukerin Elementary School in Okinawa as well. Just like I was amazed whenever I walked in, it was like the all open spacing, like you said, and it just must be so much better. I wish I got to experience that, honestly. Just
So
yeah, and it promotes just so much more. Like you said, the collaboration. Usually, like the socializing is kind of looked down upon. It's always like, be quiet in the classroom, and I think it's so great that it's like you can socialize and it can be productive and it can help you learn. It's a tool. Yeah. And that's just so great to hear that we're moving in that direction. And,
yeah, well said.
DoDEA is right there. I was going to ask you what you thought the most exotic school location is, and I think that's a little bit up to your own interpretation or definition. So it's that I want to ask you the more important question that everyone else wants to hear is, what is your favorite DoDEA school?
Oh, he-
So, that's like asking somebody,
No, 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 no.
that's like asking
There's
me
gotta
who's
be
my
one.
favorite of my 9 grandchildren, who's my favorite, of my 3 daughters, who's my favorite, 2 sons. I love them all. They're all my favorite. But there are some that stand out in being unique. So if you go in Belgium, if you go to a place called Kleine Brogel, we have an elementary school there, and there's perhaps 40 children. And they eat they have lunch together in a very small, it's not even a lunchroom. And it's just, I wish my grandchildren could go there. It's so unique. It's so homey. Everybody knows one another. That stands to me as one of the great examples of, wow, you're in a foreign country. You have a very important mission, but we still see to their needs. Guantanamo is another place that is really unique. And I think I came away with an interesting perspective from that. Puerto Rico, Guam, where America starts its day, every place. Okinawa is, who knew? It was everybody. It's like every one of your children has something unique about them that make them your favorite. So there are a number of unique places that really stand out. But overall, it's very difficult to single out. I'll tell you 2 other things. Well, I'm probably way over time, but we have a school in Ankara, and we have a school outside of Brussels called the American School of Brussels. Clever. And I attended graduations for both of those. And here's what came across to me. That of the 30, 50 students who were graduating, 25 were not American dependents or sons and daughters of American men and women. They were from our partners in peace. They were from our NATO countries. And it is so special to see our Americans, children, students, and the diversity of the international students, and they're coming together, and those international students bring America back home with them. And so as much as you're still in contact with Kubasaki, as much as the American students will be in contact with their friends from the Ukraine and from Kazakhstan.
Right.
And so does that reshape the world? Well, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, because the children that were in our schools are going to go beyond and be the Secretary of Defenses and the Prime Ministers. And that really makes things unique. And that's even another dimension of DoDEA I failed to mention at the beginning.
Absolutely. That's so important. I personally, whenever I went on a few Japanese language trips to local Okinawan schools, those were some of the best experiences I've had. And even though I did not speak great Japanese by any standard, it was still, you can still interact with other kids your age, and it's a great learning experience for everybody. And I think everyone, regardless, on both sides, just took something home from it.
Absolutely.
On tougher days, especially tough days, what motivates you to succeed as a superintendent?
Well, first of all, in this business, you don't get a whole lot of credit, and rightfully so. And if it was an easy decision, it wouldn't be darkening my door. So I'm not. I think I take very little credit for where we are because of the marvelous people that are here and understand the mission, and my job is to give them the resources and a vision to where we need to be, and then they get all the credit for getting there. So I can go on and on about how we did for COVID, how our academic achievement is bar none, some of the best in the world, and I don't personalize any of that. I think it is, if I did my job, I gave the vision and I gave the resources, and I was smart enough to let people do what they do well. And I'm blessed with great people here who understand how to put that all together, and I don't micromanage them. And boy, it's so easy to be a leader where you just say, here you go, and then I'll check on your progress as we go along, and they exceed every expectation I have. So being DoDEA director is like a blessing. I pinch myself every day.
So in the last few minutes, because we do have a time constraint, is there anything you'd like our viewers to know about you or DoDEA that we haven't talked about today?
Well, I think we need to I think we covered, thank you very much for the opportunity. And I think we covered a broad range. And I think every opportunity I've gotten to talk about how great DoDEA and its people and its students are, I have. So I don't think I left anything off the table. But I do, and I think I'm good. I can't think of too many others.
Shanon, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I would just like to say that it is going to be so great to hear some of the answers to the questions that we had, and just to know how hard that DoDEA is working for the students and how much you guys care about the students and the teachers. And I know that's going to mean a whole heck of a lot to my audience. So I just am really appreciative of, having this interview in the first place. And it was great speaking with you.
Well, I appreciate that, Shanon. Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't have I would say that I think at the end of the day, when I've talked to students, particularly overseas, I always say, I don't think anybody asked you if you wanted to be at Kubasaki in Okinawa. I don't think anybody asked you if this is where you want to be.
Right.
But it's important that you were there because your mom and dad were there doing something really important. And as long as we keep focus on that our students are where they are on earth because their parents have a mission to do, and we owe them that kind of support where they can excel, they can see things that they've never seen before, and they still have the continuity of an American high school experience and all school experience for extracurricular activities plus. And that's an important mission, and we're going to meet that.
That's fantastic. So great to hear again.
Well, I have a dog barking. I don't know what's going to happen. I just wanted to say this has been very interesting, and thank you very much for joining us. There's the dog.
There's the dog.
There he goes. Oh no.
Why don't you do the
Yeah, I can do the sign off for you. No worries, no worries. I would like to thank everyone. I'd like to thank everyone who tuned in and listened, or who will be listening. It's not live. I'd like to thank Mr. Brady one more time for joining us today, and for Dr. Woessner and Mr. O'Gara for getting this all set up for us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Once again, make sure to check out the book that we have coming up soon. It's going to be in October. Have a lot of great stories that are going to be in there, and I can't wait to read it myself, and I might have the best story in there.
He said modest.
sorry. Schooling with Uncle Sam is brought to you by the Museum of the American Military Family and Learning Center and the Shanon Show. Our podcasts are supported in part by the New Mexico Arts and New Mexico Humanities Council, Sandy Area Credit Union, and organizations like Military Brats Seal and Military Brats Registry.
I know.
Thank you very much again.
Okay.
Thank you very much. It was great to be with both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.